Hello, I'm Sam Connell. I'm a librarian at New Canaan Library.
And I'm Kathleen, another teen librarian.
And we are here to record another YA podcast for Book Brunch.
Yes, we're back with our fourth podcast.
Which is really exciting. What's nice is I'm pretty happy with the numbers of people downloading and listening, so that's been really cool. It's been a nice surprise. And we are still recording from home. We're still in the middle of the library's closure, but we have some exciting things to announce.
So we just started our summer reading program on June 12th. So that's going to be running 9 weeks through August 15th. So, this is kind of a different summer for everyone. If maybe you don't have as much to do as you normally would, it's a great time to sign up on Beanstack. And if you signed up last year, you just use your same login info. But we have lots of activities in terms of logging the books you're reading, but also 20 activity badges we put together for different things you can do, from watching plants grow in your backyard, learning about local legends, and writing postcards, just every sort of kind of fun summer thing that you can do at home this year. And we have prizes as well. So, keep logging. And then at the end of the summer, we're going to be giving away some prizes as well as doing weekly drawings.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've signed myself up. So every year, Kathleen and I pretend to be teens, much like this podcast. And we sign up and we sort of go through it ourselves. So I've actually already logged 2 books, by the way, not including the one we're going to discuss. So also some really exciting information is that if you're one of our local library patrons, we have just opened back up to being able to borrow materials. So you just need to go onto our website at newcanaanlibrary.org. You can place a hold on up to 6 items at a time, and then you're going to wait for an email, and your item's going to be left in the vestibule for you to pick up. There's a couple of restrictions just to make sure everyone's safe, and it's a very specific time window. So just go to our website for the details, and you can get back into reading non-digital books, which I think is pretty exciting for a lot of our gang. Okay, so this month we have read Sadie by Courtney Summers. And this is Kathleen's pick. So I guess you can kind of explain it, and I will let you know what my first reactions were.
All right. I'm very nervous to hear what your reactions were. I know that you were not surprised when I picked another mystery thriller. Right. I have a lot of those to recommend. But one of the things I liked about this is not that it's not the typical kind of mystery where you're just reading to find out who done it, what's the crime, what happened, basically. But it's just so much more of a character study, just a lot of interesting themes. And so just for anyone who we're going to spoil it, so please read the book first. But just to sum up the book, it's about this girl, Sadie, whose sister has been murdered, and the killer was not brought to justice. So she decides to go out on her own, track down the person she believes committed the crime, and then kill him, basically, with his own knife. And so it's a dual narrative, though, where we get Sadie's narration, but we also get, in the form of a podcast, the narration of this character, Wes McCrae, who has been investigating the disappearance of Sadie. So we're seeing what's happened after she's disappeared, but he's putting together the pieces for his podcast. So it's kind of this interesting dual story of Sadie narrating her own life and then someone else narrating what he thinks happened.
So what did you think that I thought of the book?
Because you are very measured in the way you speak and have not said anything glowing or full of excitement, I'm going to assume that you had some reservations and perhaps did not love it.
Okay. The book was so intense that I'm not really sure how I felt when I finished it. I was on the floor gasping, I'm pretty sure. I should say that this book won the 2019 Odyssey Award, which means that award is given to excellence in e-audiobook recording for young adults. Kathleen initially read it, and then you listened to it for this podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was recommending it purely off of having read the print version of the book, which I really enjoyed. And then I had heard that this was just the best way to experience it. So for purely selfish reasons, I recommended we listened to it. It's a 30-person cast or something, I think was the number I read. So just, a more in-depth kind of audiobook than I'm used to.
So first of all, before I get to the story, I mean, there's everything about this book is so intense. The recording quality, the casting of the voiceovers. Sometimes I just really dislike an e-audiobook because the voice doesn't feel right. The casting of the voices and the voice actors and actresses were phenomenal. I had never listened to a book before where there was so many casts, because when I read Harry Potter, and by the way, that's brilliantly done, but it's one person doing, I don't know, I think the final number is like 200 different voices, and he keeps all the nuances in his diction. This is actually different actors and actresses, and it's phenomenal. I loved that part of it. It's been 2 weeks since I've read it. So, I mean, what I really wanted to do when I finished it was call you up and like yell at you. It was so intense, and I couldn't believe you did that to me. I can only describe this book as it was riveting. It is so well written. The characters are amazing. The story is harrowing, but it felt like being tied to a roller coaster with your eyes covered, and there's this rush. It's exciting. You're terrified. You're really worried for Sadie. She's gone. And what they've done is the flashbacks are such that this lovely man, Wes McCrae, does this, podcast, and he's stumbled into this story because somebody's reached out, sort of a good Samaritan, next door neighbor, grandmotherly figure. And he's, I don't know the exact number, but like a few months behind her sort of first person narrative pieces. And she's in these dangerous, frightening situations. She sort of meets a person in the middle of nowhere, and she buys a car from a stranger, and she just gets in the car, and she just with a switchblade. She packs the switchblade, and she goes to track down her sister's murderer. And as you arrive to the different stops along the way, more and more disturbing things are happening. Find out her mother has a severe drug addiction. You find out that there's all sorts of child molestation in her story, interwoven through not just her sister, but she stumbles upon sort of a man, and then he injures her. He smashes her face. But you know the big reason why I'm upset, don't you?
Is it the ending?
Of course it's the ending. And I hope you've pumped the brakes by now because of all the spoiler alerts we've thrown, but you have to absolutely pause this, because in the end, you never find out what happens to Sadie. And I think I screamed. I was like, I cannot believe we don't know what happens. So you love the book, and I understand why you love the book. But if you go online, it's so polarized. It's the cilantro of young adult realistic fiction. You either love it or hate it on your salsa. There's no one who feels in between. And as I've been reading some opinions online, there are people saying this is the greatest book they've ever read. And there are people who are just furious.
No, I can see that. It was definitely different for me reading it this time because I know that there's no resolution. So I think the first time I read it was definitely a more frustrating experience. I think my feeling was that I had given myself a little time to reflect on it, and I felt that the lack of closure was appropriate. So I was okay with it. I had some maybe distance. And this time, because I wasn't expecting any kind of closure, it didn't factor into my feelings about it. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something fun in discussing what you think happened to Sadie. There are things I noticed this time that actually made me feel a little differently about my conclusions. So it was interesting.
Well, as much as I enjoyed the performances in the e-audiobook, I was frustrated because had I read that in print, I absolutely would have flipped it through sections, which you can't really do in a satisfying way when you complete an audiobook. Well, I mean, I did sort of listen to the very end over again, but it turns out that there's this father figure, and at first she's like looking for the murderer of her sister, and then we find out that one of her mother's ex-boyfriends goes under many aliases, and so she tries to track him down. Would you say? Like, she really is hunting him down.
So reading this, and I'm like, oh yeah, Sadie Hunter. Oh yeah, she's a hunter. I mean, there are just things that I don't think I read the first time. I was like, oh, okay, this is very deliberate. But I mean, it's even in her name. I mean, it's really this idea of pursuing him, and it's stopping at nothing until she finds him. So even though the clues to find him are pretty scarce, she finds all of these ways. It's just the idea of her. So she's got the knife, as I think we mentioned, and this is really the only thing she has protecting her. But so she's going and she's befriending the kids of this man that she knows him, and just all of these weird ways in which she's finding more information about him. So I think it's a really interesting journey because it doesn't seem like she should be able to find him, and the fact that she is able to, I think that was the momentum for me to keep reading. The first time I read it, like, how could she possibly find him based on such little information?
I agree. Her character, let's just talk about that for a minute. I just really feel that there's so many beautifully written characters that feel so real, but Sadie is just stunning. She basically says at one point she doesn't fully expect to return from this hunt alive. And every time she tangles into a bad situation, she's fierce. I mean, she's basically not sure when her next meals are coming from. She's showering or cleaning herself up in a gas station bathroom. She just pretty much loads some meager belongings in a car and hits the open road. And she's pretty fierce. So what we didn't talk about, which I'm really curious about, is that Sadie has this stutter, and she talks about it a lot as she runs into people. And so she's this extraordinarily fierce character, and she's trying to track down a killer. So one of the things she has to do is stop people that are strangers and ask them questions. And even those exchanges are powerful and haunting. The amount of respect you have for Sadie as a character is extraordinary. But that also must have been an interesting contrast when you're reading it on paper versus hearing it in the audiobook.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it has less of an impact in print, certainly, because you can definitely feel the pacing too of how long it takes her. So, I mean, on the page, she might be saying, I need to say this, but it's taking so long. I'll find another way to say it. They're losing interest, things like that. And then in the audiobook, it's more palpable. I think you can really tell you're in that moment with her.
Absolutely. And I very much felt in her head. And as you go along, she's just so brave, and she's so determined, and she's guided by a lot of love. One of the things that I find most amazing about this book is how real it is and how realistic it feels. So the man she tracks down does die, but what was mind-blowing was that he died by climbing into bed with his wife with a knife wound. And then he dies over the night. And oh my gosh, the theories online of what happened to Sadie and whether she survived that and whether she's sort of just changed her identity and has moved on. I feel that because the ending is the way it is, it does seem more realistic. I mean, unfortunately, the statistics on missing children and how many open cases there are out there, and tons of people Google search the term, "Is Sadie by Courtney Summers based on a true story?" It just feels so real.
I hadn't found that. That's so funny. I mean, I think she does do a good job. So you can either listen to just the podcast portions, or you can listen to the full cast audiobook with Sadie's part and the podcast. But I mean, they produced it as you would an actual podcast. So it definitely, it hits all of the beats of a real podcast. It feels, I read some interviews with Courtney Summers where she's talking about being influenced by Serial and, just those true crime podcasts that have become really popular, and sort of the conflicting emotions, though, that those sparked in her, too, which I thought was really interesting. That was one of the things I liked, is that she's not saying, you can't enjoy these. She's not saying that she doesn't enjoy them, but there is something to the idea that this person is not telling your story. This person doesn't know the story. So to be able to juxtapose what West is saying is Sadie's story based on the information he can piece together versus Sadie telling her own story, I think you can see some interesting discrepancies and changes that he wouldn't be able to know, but his own reality, his own experiences can kind of color his perception of what's going on.
I love that aspect of the book where you can see Wes McCrae come to the conclusions he comes to, and you, the reader, know that some of them are wrong, or not just his perspective shifting, but their characters where you actually hear or read about the interaction between them and Sadie. And then when Wes catches up and he's basically trailing and following the breadcrumbs through Sadie's journey, and he has a conversation, you know who's lying, you know who's telling the truth, as Wes sort of stumbles his way through the story and tries to figure out the truth. I felt Wes deeply as a character because he gets very upset and emotional at the end. He finds out that these girls, you know, what they've been going through, and he also doesn't really know what's happened and whether it's going to be a happy ending or not. And I very much felt that. So I guess at the end of it, I did love it, but it was a tough pill to swallow. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that I listened to it sort of like a binge. A lot of people, I've read a lot of reviews, people feel that way where you just can't look away and you're just so pulled into the story. So if you kind of like a little bit of trauma, if you like a mystery and the suspense and you can handle the dark topics, you probably love this book. Okay, I'm going to sidebar really quickly. So I used to cook professionally, and one of the things that we had to learn, I remember one of my chef instructors saying to me, you need to take your tastes away from, so if you're tasting a souffle, you have to professionally know whether it was executed perfectly and exquisitely, and you have to separate that from whether you like souffle. I don't know that I liked this souffle, but it was absolutely stunning and perfectly executed.
I appreciate that metaphor. That's nice.
Everything always comes back to food for me.
Well, so one thing I do want to point out, though, is as you expertly skirted the topic, do you have theories yourself about either the ending or anything that was going on? Because I will say, for me, a lot of what I thought the first time, I felt maybe a little differently this time. Oh. And I'm curious.
That's fascinating. All right, so I'll go first. All right. So I think part of my angst is that I'm looking for reasons to believe that Sadie survived and avenged her sister, but in my heart, I just, like, if I were just to read the situation and say honestly what I felt from what the author has written, I don't think she survived it. And I think I read one review where someone said the fact that this, you know, that the person that I forgot his name. Well, he had 3 different names throughout the course of the book.
I can't remember. I'm like, it's Darren, or it's Keith,
right.
or it's, and I don't know which one.
Yeah. Right. So because he had climbed back into bed injured, there were a lot of theories, and one of them was like, you know, it means that he was still functional, and for Sadie, a 19-year-old girl, to be able to hurt him like that, what did he do to her? And then that's when I start shutting down and just, don't want to think through that one. But no, I don't think she survived that encounter.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, I think initially I was looking at it as she gets hit in that scene, you know, because I think it's like during the day and she's describing it as if it's nighttime because she's just, everything goes black.
Wow.
And I was thinking that was her maybe death scene. But then I realized this time that no, she didn't stab him. So she obviously stabs him afterwards. So there's some sort of altercation that we don't see. And I mean, that gave me a little sense of hope. Now, I agree with you that, you know, in what scenario is he just walking away and going to bed?
Yeah.
I don't think he can just leave that. So I think unless she was essentially left for dead and didn't die, I don't think that she just, you know, she was just like, all right, see you, and then was just gone. I don't think there's any way that could have happened. But, and I don't know, I go back and forth on, is that a satisfying ending? Is that her avenging? Because he does die. She doesn't know it. And there's something poetic about him being stabbed with his own knife. And basically he, I think, has like sepsis or something. Like he's basically rotting because he's rotten. Like it's sort of a poetic kind of death for him, I guess, in a really grim way. But she doesn't get the satisfaction of that. And she doesn't get the satisfaction of knowing that this podcast exists. Like all of this seems to exist separate from her.
Unless she's still alive, then she would know about, right, that he died.
Which is true, yeah.
I mean, she's an excellent detective. So if she were still alive, she would, I don't know, she would probably like sew close her own wounds and climb over there like through brush and whatever. She was just so fierce and tough. And then she would then find out that he had died. And then what would she have? So say you buy into the theory that she survives. What does that mean? Does that mean that she just walked away from her entire past, even though her mom gets clean and she has this amazing next door neighbor that practically raised her as a grandmother? I don't know.
The stuff with the mom was actually very sad because you see Sadie's perception of her and then you realize that her mother does love her, that Sadie never gets to see those things from her, which is, you know, I mean, that's, you want that reunion. Like you're not going to get it, but you want her to finally at least see that there was more to that relationship than she realized.
I agree. But that's part of the heartbreak of Wes McCrae's path. It's sort of somebody's life in retrospect versus what Sadie is actually going through. And then you hear, because he's interviewing people so well, and you hear all the details of how they actually felt. And not that that would have happened if Claire didn't get cleaned up. She was basically a junkie raising her daughter. And that's the reason why Sadie had to take on all the responsibility. And that's why Sadie cared for her sister Maddie. She was one part mother, one part sister. And that's also what caused the problems between them. But Sadie's whole story in so many ways is just so completely tragic. And it was tough, but I would recommend it. I would definitely recommend this to any of the gang. I don't know. I know you loved it. You love these types of books. You have more recommendations for people who are comfortable in needing therapy after reading a book, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, well, what books are like this? Like, they're dark. I wasn't going to find something that wasn't. But if you liked this book, I think you would like any of these books as well. So the first one I had on my list, this was a Nutmeg nominee a few years back, The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I don't know if you read that one. Devastating.
I did not. I'm gonna put a note to myself that I have to be in a certain mindset for that. Okay.
So similar type of story in that the main character, her sister, is murdered and the killer is not brought to justice. So she's also a vigilante type character. But it's actually even darker, I guess, than Sadie in a way, because you have Sadie at the beginning saying, you know, I'm going to kill a man. And in this book, she's like, all right, I killed a man. And so it's basically her, wow. She's only taking on, you know, these really terrible people who have committed awful crimes, but it's this kind of morally ambiguous, how do you feel about this character who has such darkness in her, and is she justified? And I can just see on your face, like, what is she reading? It's excellent. Second one I wanted to bring up, we had lots of votes for both Sadie and our other option, Truly Devious. And so Truly Devious is maybe a little bit lighter. I mean, there's still murder, but it's, you know, if you like the true crime podcast aspect, the character is a real true crime aficionado. And, you know, it's not as emotionally devastating. So it's a little bit of a light beach read, maybe. The last one I had, Genuine Fraud by E. Lockhart. I think I always recommend this book the wrong way, because my favorite thing about the book is what no one else wants to read, which is the entire book is told backwards. So you start at the last chapter, you end at the first. And so it's so fascinating because it builds chapter by chapter. You think you know everything because you're seeing the ending, and then you're discovering things as you're going back in time that weren't immediately apparent, and things that happen with characters that you can't believe. So it kind of reminded me of Sadie in the sense that you have these different timelines. You kind of think you should know everything based on your awareness of one timeline, and then something happens to kind of change that awareness. And it also reminded me of some of my favorite scenes in Sadie were when she was befriending those kids her age and kind of imagining a different life for herself.
Mm-hmm.
If she could just kind of, if she didn't have these cares and worries, she could just be a normal kid. And there's a character in this book who is the genuine fraud, basically. So she's pretending to be someone else, but she's interacting with her peers, and it's kind of like pretending at that other life, which I think is a really interesting.
We didn't mention that, but I love that part of the book. I mean, the book, Sadie, was so well executed. And there was this wonderful part where it's sort of a break from all the stress and trauma. And in the act of tracking down her sister's killer, she sort of does a little bit of like reconnaissance by catching up with a group of teenagers just to sort of figure out who the one father is in that group. And so she ends up at like pool parties and bars, and there's like a little bit of romance sprinkled in there. By the way, I was really hoping they would get back together. That was a cute little bit of romance in the middle. Yes. So those are really great recommendations. I have 2 recommendations for Pride Month. I have, actually, maybe I only have 1. I forgot I was going to spring something crazy on you this time.
Oh no.
I love worrying you and catching you off guard. You're so great about this. So, okay, here's the thing. Here's my proposition. I would love to just recommend a book for us to read next time rather than voting. And I know that's not the most democratic thing I can do. However, I wanted to have the discussion with you, and I did bring options, but one of these options would be one of my recos. So I wanted to sort of get your feedback on that.
While we're recording, sure.
Be honest in front of anybody and everyone that can access this podcast.
Yeah, I just let it be known that Sam doesn't believe in democracy, and No, I'm good with whatever book you recommend. I mean, I've been happy with all of your picks so far, so I trust.
Okay. All right, great. So if that's the case, I can use my other options as my recos. But the reason why I wanted to pick this book for next time is I feel like I've been on this journey with Kathleen, and this is a book that I read a long time ago, and I know almost nobody who's read it before. This is where Kathleen's going to tell me she's already read it, by the way. So let's just pause that thought. I'll come back to our next month's read. So rewind, and we will go back to my Pride Month recos. The first one is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. And this was a really interesting story. Basically, it's a Puerto Rican lesbian who lives in New York City, and she reads a book by a feminist that she just really feels understands her in every way. So she flies to Portland, Oregon, and she basically lives in this woman's house, and she's almost like a guru the way she's written. She's very much sort of a crunchy, barefoot, and then there's some really interesting conflict between, different types of feminism and what that means, not only for gender identity, but for race and ethnicity. So that was a fascinating book. It was really fun as Juliet I think you can almost call it coming of age, which we've been talking about a lot lately. The second one is The 57 Bus. Have you read The 57 Bus?
I haven't yet, no.
I loved it. And I really like to try to keep our books that we do in YA book podcast pretty diverse. And this started as a book brunch where the kids would come to the library. So we haven't been able to do that for a few months. But I really try to keep sort of the selections diverse, not just in terms of ethnicity, but also main characters, fantasy, genres. We also try to move from books in verse to graphic novels. So we try to cover everything in the course of about a year. 57 Bus, I really try to have the kids who are on board read nonfiction once a year. And we actually read it not too long ago, and everybody loved it. It's the story about a Black boy in California. I want to say LA, but I might be wrong. I read it a long time ago. Anyway, so he sets the skirts of a gender fluid boy, born a boy, on a bus. So this child is just sort of discovering his sexuality, his identity. He's not sure with some of it, but he does like to wear skirts, and he sort of has very liberal and open parents, and he goes to this amazing school, and he's brilliant. And so they cross paths on this public bus for just a few minutes, and the one boy was horsing around with his friends, and they light his skirt on fire. Sorry, their skirt on fire. That's the pronoun that one of the characters uses. And it's a real story that was in the newspapers. And so Dashka Slater does this amazing job of sort of probing the two sides of it, and whether it was hate crime or whether it was teenage stupidity. And she really explores race, class, social justice. It's amazing. So that was my backup plan. If you said no to me, that we could go back to democracy and pick between 57 Bus or my next recommendation, which I really want to read. It's called Nothing by Jane Teller. Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it. I don't really know anything beyond that, though. And I can't remember what country is it from?
So it's okay. That's the other thing I try to do. If you are making an effort to read broadly, make sure you read through all of the different books I just talked about, or styles of books, types of books, characters in books, but also try to read a book in translation. It's really a great way to get a different perspective. I think it's more important to read a book that's been translated from another language rather than read a book by somebody in English who is projecting their perspective onto a different culture. So this book, it was, Jane Teller is a Danish writer, and it's beautifully translated. I don't have the name of the translator in front of me, but I've started to, in a really creepy way, follow translators on Twitter. There's a whole nother group of fascinating people. But I love this book. So this book is about a group of kids in a small town, and one of the boys that they pass on the way to school, he just decides to sort of climb a tree and insist that nothing matters, and he's just basically a nihilist. And they're pretty young, and it's kind of a strange ragtag group of kids. It's not a group of friends, it's a group of sort of like neighborhood kids. So it's sort of a little bit of breadth and age, and there's both boys and girls. And so they decide to try to figure out what matters by giving up things that they think matter. And they try to top each other one by one. And I would love to discuss this book with you, because if you are okay with trauma, it's also a little existential. It's really fascinating. It's one of those books which I love to discuss with the teens, and I would love to know your take on this book. So we can either, after we stop recording, Kathleen reprimands me for springing this on her, we can decide whether we'll just make you all read Nothing by Jane Teller with us, or if we will leave it up to a democratic process and vote between the 57 Bus and Nothing.
I like the idea of someone asking you, what are you reading? And you're just like, nothing.
It's pretty good. It's full of really, anyway. So we'll figure that out. We'll put that on the website. I think that's about it. It's like hot in here. I feel like I'm under the withering gaze of Kathleen through my Skype. I'm a little bit uncomfortable.
I'm not judging. No. No, that book sounds great. All of your book recommendations sounded great. So I'm looking forward to whatever we end up reading.
Awesome. Yeah. I think we have to figure out lighthearted beach reads for July and August, right? But I'm also, definitely go on our website, check out the summer reading program. We're also publishing lists from our local middle school and our high school. And I am so excited to see some of those lists. You know that. There's some great things. Usually I spend my summer reading through those lists, and I'm always impressed.
Yeah, so that's going to be great to have those lists out. The people can come for curbside pickup. And we have lighthearted books inside the library, I promise.
We'll get to some eventually. Again, reading broadly. Okay, I think that's it. That was super fun. It was really nice. I love chatting with you about books. That's been a highlight of quarantine.
It's been a good time.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.